Hey everyone, Margarita here. I want to talk in this video about how my mother began paying people and bribing people to follow me to the place that I made the majority of my money at back in 2019. And she began doing this, I'd say, probably about a year after I had only been working at that one particular place. Prior to that, I had been mostly in Detroit for almost 10 years, and I had gone other places as well, and I had worked in Ohio as well prior. But after I became injured in 2018, I knew going forward I would only be able to be self-employed going forward from there. And initially, I wasn't even sure if I was going to live or if I was ever going to get treatment and how long I really had, because I was barely holding on to life. So, about a year into me only working in Ohio, so this is probably mid 2019, um, she had sent my dad over to my house and told him to figure out where I work at. And because she doesn't know anything about me or how I've been making my money all these decades and what's actually going on in my life, she assumed that I actually worked for the establishment or whatever place or places I was at. She assumed that I actually worked for them. And this came out numerous different ways down the line. But I've been self-employed for a long time. So since 2007. And she just wasn't aware of that. She just assumed that I bow down to other people and I work for them and do whatever they say. That's not how this industry works. That's not how it goes at all. And at some point, I did begin. So I think this was maybe after COVID. I started going to the other place, not far from the one I was already at. And I had also been there many times years ago as well. So neither one of them was new when I started at either one. I had worked at those establishments many years ago also. But at the time that this happened, I was just at the one establishment. I was very sick. I was very close to death. I didn't know if I was going to live or not at the time that this was going on. And um, I had just began treating at the treatment center, and I was still a really long ways away from crossing the first threshold or even knowing if I was going to survive the injuries or if my son was going to survive the injuries. I just knew that if I didn't try to attempt to get there on the busiest nights, which would be Friday and Saturday night, we weren't going to stand a chance at all. And all during that time, I couldn't do anything but lay on the couch, barely get from room to room in my house, and only do those 1 or 2 nights, 4 or 5 hours a night, those 1 or 2 nights a week, and sometimes not at all. So it was a very fragile situation, but I knew I wasn't going to be able to make money any other way with how severely injured I was. And I knew I wasn't going to be able to work for somebody else ever again. I knew I wasn't going to be able to freely walk into restaurants ever again. And I shouldn't have been working or standing at all. I should have truly been in an inpatient facility doing hyperbaric dives until my brain was no longer sagging and the carbon monoxide was cleared, which to this day, it's still not cleared and my brain tissue is still open. And that's only because I've had so many re-injuries, or I'd be a significant degree forward to where I am today. So at the time when this all happened in 2019, I was just barely getting there the little bit that I was. And once I did start treating at the center, I was able to at least maintain those 2 nights a week, but literally it was 4 or 5 hours, and it was never a minute more than the fifth hour. And I couldn't even get home. I would still have to pull over numerous times and fall in and out of consciousness on the ride home due to how severe the brain injuries were and how I could barely stand up or do anything. So, at that time, my dad was frequently coming to my house, and initially, there was a private investigator who was sitting across the street from my house. And this man followed me all the way down to work. And this was probably the first month or two I had even attempted to try to work after my injury. So this was the summer of 2018. Um, this man told on himself right away, because not only could you clearly see the vehicle across the street from my house, it stood out like a sore thumb. And then the guy had followed me to a gas station after I'd crossed state lines. He actually approached me and asked me for directions, and I gave him wrong directions in the opposite direction. And then he showed up at my work after that. That's when I realized he was looking for me the whole time. And that's when I verified for sure that was the guy that was sitting across the street from my house. And he had been sitting across the street maybe like for a couple weeks, I'd say. And then after this, different other types of vehicles began kind of lurking around my house for a while. But I'm not really sure what or if anything came of those circumstances. Just this one guy stood out more, because like how my house is set up, I don't always see the front of my house unless I'm outside or something. But this one guy had followed me there, and I actually knew who he was. I figured out that was the guy who'd been sitting across the street from my house. It was the guy that followed me to the gas station. Now he's in my work, and so I made it a point to go talk to him and tell him how injured and sick I was, because my brain was so fragile I could barely walk. And I was trying to figure out what he wanted. And at first, I thought he was a private investigator for the place that had caused my injury, because they were trying to not pay for what had happened to me. And I needed full payment. At this point, I had been severely injured for several years, because we were going on like the 2.5 year mark at that point. And I had lost a lot of money already, and I had just bought my house, and I knew that if I didn't struggle to make the little bit that I could at that time, A, we weren't going to live, and B, we were going to lose everything. So that's what I was doing, and it didn't matter that, I was that injured and sick. I just knew we weren't going to live and we were going to lose everything. And that's why I was there. And because it was all or nothing at that point, and this place wasn't going to give me $1. And to this day, I haven't received, I did get $4,900 earlier last year, but that's nothing because I lost over $1 million. And so I thought that's where this guy came from initially. But as time went on and the more things that happened and as situations played out, I'm more starting to think that this guy was actually hired by my mother. Because then the following year, it might have not even been a full year. It might have been closer to like the 6 month mark when, when she sent my dad over to my house and had him asking questions about where I worked at. I didn't tell him the name of the place, but I gave him a description of like where it was. And after he said all that and I answered with what I answered with, he said, "Oh, well, your mother wanted to know." And I was like, "What? Don't tell her that. Like, why would you be telling her that?" So he was used quite a bit to carry out all of these crimes because she had no direct access to me. And because she was able to repeat so many delusions to him over the course of all these decades, because she had been doing this since I was a small child, it never stopped. After I moved out when I was 18, it never stopped. So he's not aware. He was never aware that these were all delusions coming out of her mouth. She has no reason to know anything about me. Every step of the way, even during the most extreme chaos and all the crimes and the harassment, all the problems, and he's helping create it. He wasn't even aware that everything she was saying to him every step of the way was all delusions. And she has no knowledge of my life or anything about me. And she has no business asking questions about me or what I have going on. So he asked that, and then I told him not to tell her, but apparently he did go back and he told her. So it wasn't right away, or maybe it could have been, because the nights that I worked and during that time period prior to COVID, it was very busy, and I was very sick and injured, and I was barely able to walk, um, just to barely do what I was doing and get what I needed to pay for the treatment, which was a little over $1,000 a week plus all my bills. So I don't know if there was people in there prior to COVID watching me, but that's where this all initiated. It was prior to COVID. It was 2019. And there very well could have been people following me around there watching me, and I just didn't know, because of how fragile my brain was, how sick and injured I was, and just like my overall state of being. And I was able to make large sums of money in very short periods of time. And a lot of this time I had spent in the back room, not out on the main floor. So even if there was people coming and looking for me, a lot of times they wouldn't have found me either. So that very well could have been the case, but it didn't, I didn't catch anything at that time. But it wasn't until after I went back to work after COVID, so like literally just after COVID, that's where people began following me to my work, to gather information on me, insert themselves into my life, observe what I'm doing, and how I go about my business or my day or my week or whatever was going on. That's where people began showing up there, or that's where it became noticeable to me. And at this point, I had crossed several thresholds. I had done well over 100 grand out of pocket in treatments, and I was in a way different place upon returning after COVID. I did take a full 16 months off work, and I had no choice. I couldn't wear a mask whatsoever. That's still the current situation today. I'm still in a state of suffocation, and still overloaded with carbon monoxide. So when I exhale, carbon monoxide still comes out to this day. So I was off for a very long time. And I went through a lot to get to the place I was in when I finally came back to work after COVID, where I was then a lot more functional. I was able to handle a little bit longer of a shift. And then I was able to kind of squeeze in the third day here and there as well, working or the third night, I guess you could say. But I also had a household employee working for me, and that's why I was able to carry that much out. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to do that. So she took care of everything within my household, was helping me remodel the home, which those plans had already been in place for years, but I had lost so many years due to the incapacitation. There was nothing I could do about it. So she was helping me work on all of those matters. And even though I paid her a regular wage that she would have worked at a regular job, um, it didn't matter because I was able to produce that much more money, and it worked better for me to do it that way and just do the things that I had to do and make sure I could get to work and hold myself together and get to treatment. So I was working a little bit more, and I was like in a better place to be able to observe things and see what's going on. And I'd be there longer, and then I was there the extra day, and I'd be able to talk to people a little bit better. Because prior to that, I couldn't really talk or hold long conversations because of how severely my brain was injured. I just kept it very short and sweet because usually I would spend my shifts just dancing the whole time, dancing, not really talking. Um, and because people are there drinking alcohol, they're not really thinking that the person they're talking to is in the state that I was in. It's all an illusion because I don't look sick and injured, especially if I had a beer in my hand. I'd have a beer in my hand just to carry it around so I blended in. Didn't matter if I was drinking it or not. Nobody knew that. Nobody was paying attention to that. But because there was a lot of times I couldn't drink at all. And so after coming back to work after COVID, that's where I started noticing several individuals trying to insert themselves into my life many different ways. So it's like a whole handful of people that I did notice. I don't even have all of their names, because they didn't give me their names, and I could identify them if I seen them. I could identify them, but I don't even know all of their names. And actually, I think it is probably like closer to two handfuls, maybe. But I don't know. I'd say probably half of their names, and they told on themselves. So every single person that did this told on themselves. And at this point, I had been aware that my mother had been committing all these decades of crimes against me, and that she had paid people to insert themselves into my life, bring back information on me, cause problems. I knew that for some years at that point, that it had happened in the past. And I will show a picture of one of these people along the way did take a picture of me, and it ended up in a court file in 2013. So I will show it in a different video because I have a picture. I have the picture. But I don't know who the person is. I don't even know if he gave me his name at that time, or maybe he did and it was a fake name. I'm not sure. I didn't know the person. But I will show the picture in a different video when I talk about some of the other things, that the kidnappings during the 2013 escapade. I'll show the picture. So I was aware that this had gone on in the past. And then I was starting to notice it's the questions that people would ask me or the things they would say to me. One of them even flat out called me by my legal government name. And nobody at any of these establishments ever knew my real government name. I never went by my real name. No one knew my real name. Even the high up management who had known me for many years had no clue what my government name was because I'm not known by that. Nobody calls me that. So that was one of the big red flags of one of the people. And I'm going to kind of separate this. I'm not going to talk too much into depth about all of these people in this video. Some of them will be separate videos. And Some of it I'm going to put a hold on talking about for a little while. Some of this information, I need to get a little bit more information, and things need to play out a little bit further for me to release some more of the information, because I can't just give up all of the information that I have. So that's how I knew. And a couple of these people, I was aware that that's who they were. Well, I'd probably say like two or, like three of them. I'd say two to three people maybe, that I was aware who they were, and I continued to speak with them on more than one occasion going forward. And I did this because I knew what they were doing. I knew what the agenda was, and I was trying to gather information. I was already gathering information. At this point, I had already had Charmaine involved documenting the ongoing crimes for a while at that point. So I was just bringing her back all of the information and all the craziness that's going on around me at this time. So I did continue to talk to some of these people, like just noting each week what each person was doing, or if I had contact with that person or not, or whatever was going on. So these people all told on themselves. Um, let's see. So this happened from 2019, although, and then it didn't happen again. I didn't see the first person till like mid 2021, and then I seen another person like beginning of 2022, or no, it's probably still 2021. And then the next one was like beginning of 2022, and then in 2023 a couple more. So so it wasn't like all at one time. They were all very spaced apart, but I was catching on to what was going on. So a few of these people, I'm not even going to say some of their names that I do have. I'm going to hold that for a later time, and I do need to speak with federal investigators. This is interstate. I live in Michigan. I was working in Ohio. This crossed state lines a long time ago. Not to mention, these crimes are RICO crimes. These are federal crimes already prior to that happening. So a lot of this information I'm going to keep private, because this would need to be told to federal investigators, not to the general public. But there are people who can verify what I'm talking about. And there is a couple of people who I knew for several years prior to COVID, who I trusted enough to let them know something was going on. So they were also able to gather a little bit of information for me as well. And they also kind of had an eye out for me, because I think they worked a little bit more than me as well. So there is people who can verify some of this. Should this go in the right direction, and the investigation goes where it's supposed to, and I'm able to connect all of the dots, because there's a lot of different dots that have to be connected. That's why my videos are all separate. If I were to just come out and start talking about all of this, everybody would be lost. So everything I'm doing, all these videos are extremely separated, because that's the only way to tell it. All of these are connected. All these pieces connect together. And it's all pertaining to the ongoing crimes, and my mother's at the root of it. And so are all these groups who have helped her. So the dots do connect, and I further connected more dots. But like I said, I can't just release all of the information right now. So I am going to try to gather a little bit further information. And some of it I may not even be able to talk about until after arrests are made, due to how like fragile the entire situation is and how much information I actually have, because my life is in danger, and I've been aware of that for some time, several years. But it is my mother who started sending people across the border to follow me and watch me at work. And because I'm so sick and fragile, I don't really have the ability to just go out with people and hang out and party and stuff. But she was assuming that I was, and telling these people that my injury was all in my head and such. And some of these people also told on themselves by saying these things, or assuming these things. Either way, I wasn't able to just like go out whenever I wanted or live my life like a regular person. It was still very fragile. I would go out from time to time, very limitedly, but it was extremely limited. And I had to make sure I could get to work and back, and to treatment and back, and then the work I was doing on the home. So beyond that, I had very limited like free time, and like time that I was actually spending with other people. it was just extremely limited. So I didn't really have room for additional individuals to be a part of my life or me to go extra places. It was just extremely limited. So when they were approaching me with this stuff, it still wasn't an option for me to just say, oh, okay, yeah, sure. And then when they try to say, like, oh, well, that's all in your head, and it's not. And well, first of all, now you've told on yourself, and then or by using my real name, now you've told on yourself some more. So obviously wouldn't be going anywhere with you. But um it was a very fragile situation. I couldn't just go out with people whenever I wanted and do whatever. So I had to remain in that manner of how I went back to work after COVID, of doing the little bit that I was doing and doing the things I had slowly started to piece back together in my life. And then during the gas leak, which happened only 2 months, maybe 2 to 3 months after I returned to work, I was on the run for my life and staying in different hotels, and my life was so chaotic. It had disrupted everything. So then I went straight back to like having no quality of life and just barely getting to work the little bit that I was, and barely getting to treatment and keeping us alive. And I went straight back to that for quite some time. So now a couple of times initially, I did go out with a couple of these people because I wanted further information. And I know that sounds very dangerous, but you have to understand that during this time I was carrying a gun, which was totally legal. And I know what I'm doing. I'm spiritually gifted, and I can read people like none other. And people don't realize that. They think I'm very naive. So I did go out with a couple of these people, a couple of places. And um, a couple of these times it was just to get away from my house after I returned home from the gas leak and before I had moved, just to get myself out of the general area. So that was the reason I had agreed to do so. And plus, I was already gathering information on what my mother had been doing, trying to put together the crimes, trying to piece it all together. Because I stayed so sick for so many years, I wasn't able to gather anything further than what I saw in front of my face. So at this point, I'm starting to gain a little more momentum, gathering the evidence, putting together the crimes, getting information from all of these people who've participated. And that's actually what I was doing. But nobody realized, nobody was aware. And unless they see this video, the majority of them aren't going to know. Or like they don't even know my real name, or I wasn't even using my Facebook, I don't think, at the time, or I didn't have any social media sites or anything. So I'm not even sure any of these people would be able to find it. But that's what I was doing. So I kind of verified the information further by gathering the information, bringing it back to Charmaine, and then more people would come about, or more situations or people, because some of these people did not actually talk to me. They would just watch me. So I would tell her, what was going on. And then along the way, as situations would happen, I started piecing together other situations from way long time ago, long before I was ever injured, that she was actually doing this all along the way. So everything slowly started to come out, piece together a little further. And now I have a lot more information than I ever thought I would have, or it's gotten to such an extreme degree. I have almost the entire picture put together in every situation that's happened in every person. Not 100% of the people, but I have almost every single one of them. So the fact that I don't have some other names is the only issue, but there might be other people who could get their names. So I'll save all that for the future, given I can talk to an investigator who can look further into this for me. And that's the only other way to go about getting the rest of that information. But what she was doing is she was attempting to have them gather information on me, and then have them get me to get myself arrested, like have them trip me up, like get myself to do something stupid so then I'd get arrested, when I'm like really sick and injured, barely had any quality of life at all. And then had not, this was coming out of years of having no quality of life, like over 5 years of no quality of life. And this is what was going on. So she didn't realize that I don't just randomly go out with people either. And the only reason I had went out with a couple of these people was because I needed further information. And this was the only way I was going to get it at that time. Now, at this time, I had already tried going to numerous different 3-letter agencies and trying to report these crimes. And that was, well, this is probably shortly before I went to the FBI in the Toledo office. But they then told me to start gathering stuff. They didn't tell me to start, personally talking to people and getting the information in person. But I knew based on what they said, that was going to be one of the only ways I was going to get the information. And they did tell me to start FOIA requesting documents and videos and this and that, which I did start doing. But I also knew that a lot of this information and what my mother was doing, a lot of it was just delusional phone call placing, and there wouldn't be any record of it either. And I do own the phone line that she has. So at one point I did try to contact the company and get the log of calls, because most companies have this, but Cricket does not. So that set of phone lines, because we have a whole bunch of phones between us, but that set of phone lines, you're not able to get that with Cricket. And then I asked if I had a warrant, would I be able to get it? They couldn't answer my question. So I just started gathering the information the best I could with what I had, or what little ability I had at the time. And the more people that came into this or cross paths with me or red flag me that they're involved, the further I went with it, because at the same time I was still treating every day, and I was slowly getting better and better. And except for during the period where the gas leak happened and everything kind of paused, um, I wasn't slowly getting better and better. I did have a period where I did have to pause for an additional year, but then I started to slowly treat again and get a little bit better. Because there's been periods of time where I had some okay-ish periods of time, but the majority of it was not. So I'd say like the majority of the past 10 years, I've pretty much lost. There was only like several few month periods where I was like okay-ish. So it was during those times where I took the opportunity to gather this information. And literally it was my dad who told on my mom that that's what was going on. That's how I knew. And then these people just told on themselves. So I just kept gathering and gathering. Um, Obviously I didn't put myself in any crazy situations, because I was in public places that were all very well lit, all with camera systems, and then I'm carrying, so it's not really a big deal to me. So if they thought like they were slick, or they thought they were going to get one over on me, it wasn't going to work, because at the root of all of this, I've already mentioned in the other videos that she needs to be incarcerated or deemed mentally incompetent or deceased. So I guess you could say if any of these people were the right person, yeah, they could potentially attempt to make me unalived. So, fortunately for me, that didn't exactly happen. Um, I'm not saying that no one was ever brought in or attempted to, or that wasn't somebody's agenda who was brought in on this, because that very well could have been. But it wasn't ever going to get that far with me, because I'm always 10 to 20 steps ahead of the game. So I'm already prepared. And that's what everybody's not realizing. Everybody thought I was naive every step of the way, every single person. And every single person told on themselves for thinking that I was naive. So I just continued on to like take it a little further, ask further questions with each person, or gather more information from each person. And as each person was doing this, it told me more and more and more, because each person had different answers, and uh, each was individually different. These people didn't all know each other. At least I don't think they did. But the fact that these people, I'd say at least half of them or more, were from Michigan, and they cross state lines to follow me in there to do this. So I did gather the information. I took it even further, and um, I like got really crazy with it kind of there in the end, because like I fully had almost the whole picture at that point. And now where I am today, I'm basically dealing with the fallout of all my mother's escapades and crimes. And I haven't really been able to work because of all that. And my work is all it's been within my home the past couple of years because of the fallout of all those crimes and escapades. I had no choice to address all the damage to my home. So that's where all of my work has been. Everything I'm working on is out of my home. I'm working on several things, but they're all out of my home. They can all be done out of my home. I don't have to leave. So in the last 2 years, I don't really have too many updates on people following me or trying to gather information on me or following me to work, because I've worked very minimally the past couple years. But and then if I'm in my home, how are you really going to get any information on me? So I don't have any like recent information really. The majority of this information was gathered between 2019 and like the beginning of 2024, I guess you could say. So that's where the majority of my information came from. There was like a handful or two of people that I did know that these people are involved 100%. And it was my dad who basically gave up that information by stating that my mother was asking these questions and trying to figure out where I work, but she wasn't slick enough to understand that I'm self-employed at these places and I pay them, they don't pay me, and I don't punch somebody's clock. So she had that a little bit twisted when she was relaying some of this information to some of these people as well, because then they respond to me with like strange things that just aren't reality. So that's some of the red flags. I'm going to come back and I'm going to talk about how I was fraudulently pulled over and got a DUI for something that shouldn't have happened. And I'm not going to talk about some in between steps and things that happened because I don't have enough information to publicly release yet. But I am going to read the false reports and talk about how all of that happened and the connections within it, um, because these people are all connected to each other. So I will come back and talk about that. And then I'm going to talk about how the probation officer in the very beginning tried to submit a false drug test on me, which made it look like I was on a bunch of drugs, and I'm not, and I can't be because of my injury, or I'd be deceased already. And then she didn't realize that I take a regular drug test at my primary doctor's office every month already. And that just so happened to be a couple days prior to this. And then nobody knew I also got my own blood drug test and went to a third party facility outside of my doctor's office and had backed up the reality of the situation. And I didn't tell anybody this until after it had happened. It was a couple weeks after it had happened. So I will talk about that in its own separate video as well. So those are the two next videos I'm going to come back and talk about, because it is all connected and it's tied in with the crimes and how they're all going to get rid of me. So yeah, I'll be back with more. Thanks. Bye.